So this is just a really quick presentation on how to create really strong essay titles and what to avoid when writing an essay title. So first of all, you might think, why do we even have to have a presentation on titles? What's the importance of having a title besides just putting something kind of at the top of the paper? And it really is important. It's kind of the first impression of the paper, and it also gives the reader a little bit of insight into what they're going to be reading about. So you want to make sure that you have a title that reflects the content in a clever or engaging way. If you write a poor title, you usually do one of the following things. So one, and this is probably one of my biggest pet peeves, so it's good for you to know now, do not write the title of the assignment. So for example, the first essay is a narrative essay. Your essay title should not be narrative essay, nor should it be essay one or anything like that. Now, certainly, if you need some type of visual for a title and you don't know what title to put yet, you can put something like that. But just note that if you have that still on your rough draft, if you are using it as a visual, I'm probably going to make a comment on your rough draft that says this shouldn't be the title of the essay. So just keep that in mind. One that's too few words. So if you are writing about homecoming dance and your essay just says homecoming, that's not a good title for a couple reasons. One is homecoming doesn't always mean a dance. Even if we're looking at, like, say, high school terms and high school homecoming, well, there's homecoming dance, but there's also homecoming game, homecoming week. So if you're just talking about something that happened at the dance, then homecoming isn't really helpful for the content. And then also, homecoming is when someone comes home. Maybe someone was in the Army and they're coming home. Someone traveled overseas for graduate school and they're coming home. So that title, just saying that one word is not really reflective. It's a general question, so especially this is something that can happen later on when you're writing, say, your argumentative essay. You just write something like, why are people angry? Well, it's better to make a claim about anger and use that as your title than to have kind of a general question. If you do write a question, then your audience is going to think that your paper is only exploring that question. And if, let's say, you are writing an argument, you're providing answers and statements and potentially some research. And so it's going to look really weird that you started it with a question. Now, you could do a two-part title, which we'll talk about in a second. And if you do a two-part title, one part of it could be a question, but you don't just want to have a question as a title unless it's really some type of paper, like maybe an exploratory essay, but we're not doing one of those in this class. It misleads the reader regarding the topic. So this isn't a time to be so clever and creative that they're really engaged by the title, and then they read the paper and they look back at the first page and go, wait, why was it called this? You don't want to leave the reader kind of scratching their head saying, why did this have this really great title that has nothing to do with the content of the paper? I remember there was one time my parents had rented a movie, so of course this was a long time ago in a video rental store, and I want to say the movie was called Montana, and my mom said it was just really strange to her that the movie was called that because it wasn't until the very end of the movie where one of the characters said something about they were going to move to Montana or something like that. And so imagine watching a movie called Montana and you get an hour into it and you're like, wait a minute. This doesn't take place in Montana. None of the characters' names are Montana. There's not a restaurant or business in this movie called Montana. Why is this movie called Montana? Then for the rest of the movie, you are kind of distracted by that title. So you don't want to do that with your paper. And then just in general, a poor title would be one that's not formatted correctly. It has spelling errors. Again, this is kind of the first impression that your reader sees. And so an error in the title can really put kind of a damper on the rest of the paper. So some examples of poor titles. Again, if you're writing a topic proposal and you call it topic proposal, global warming, it's so generic and really it doesn't tell the reader, is this going to be an informative essay on global warming? Is this going to be an argument about global warming legitimacy? There's really no insight here. Why are general education classes required? So again, we have kind of a question, and for the papers you're writing for this class, you don't want to have a question. So instead, like let's say you're writing an argument, you would want maybe a title that very clearly shows that you feel that they should or they should not be required. Focusing funding on music education. So again, we don't really know if the reader is going to be for this or against it in any way. And you don't have to be so literal and say the argument for focusing funding on music education, but there are really kind of clever, fun ways to make that purpose clear. Flagging fake news, the responsibly is not social media's problem. So it's not MLA because the capitalization is not MLA format. And in this class, you're doing MLA format. It's got a misspelling, responsibly. That's not the correct word. So it has potential as a title, and it's actually, in general, the strongest title on this list of poor titles. But because of the formatting issue, because of the spelling error, it becomes a really clunky, bad title. Attributes of a good title. So these are ones where the reader really feels like they have a quick insight into what this paper is going to be about. And usually there's that two-part title that I talked about before. So you have one part that's really kind of catchy. You can even get a little bit informal as far as tone or something with that part of the title. And then the other part is more straightforward. And if you do that, you would put a colon between the two parts. So the first part is the catchy part, then you put a colon, and then you put the more straightforward part. Now, if you do that, then that's where you can put maybe a question for your first catchy part. And we'll look at a two-part title in a second. And then again, you have proper formatting and you don't have typos. So a couple good titles. The Shadow Knows, The Importance of Cinematography in Film Noir. So that's a fun title because The Shadow Knows, this is an older reference, but there used to be something called The Shadow, and that was kind of the catchphrase, The Shadow Knows. But it's a twist on that because with cinematography, that has a lot to do with the way a movie that you would watch is lit, the lighting of it. And so talking about shadows of movies is often what people talk about when they talk about the cinematography of movies. So The Shadow Knows is the catchy part, and then the importance of cinematography in film noir is kind of the straightforward, letting the reader know what the paper is going to be about. And then Jingle All the Way, promotion of capitalism in Christmas films. So it sounds really fun at first, but then you realize there's going to be kind of this more serious argument. And this also is kind of a play on things because Jingle All the Way is an actual Christmas movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I watch it every year at Christmas. And Arnold plays this father who's kind of busy and has kind of lost focus on his family because he's always working. I think it's like a mattress company or something. I watch the movie every year. I should know. But he's always working. And so his son only wants this one toy at Christmas, and he of course waits to the last minute, and he's trying to get it, and it's like sold out everywhere. It's impossible to get, and you just see all these people who are trying to get the last toy at all these stores. So if you're talking about capitalism in Christmas films, using that film's title as kind of part of your title is a way to tie it in and be a little bit catchy. Formatting titles in MLA, make sure that you capitalize all of the main words. So any word that's the first word, so the first word of your title and the first word of your subtitle, which is what's after the colon, those are always going to be capitalized no matter what they are. And then everything else that's within your title that is not a preposition or an article will be capitalized. Make sure it's centered. You're not going to do any special formatting to it except center it. So the font is going to be the same size as everything else in the paper. It's not going to be bold. It's not going to be highlighted, underlined, anything crazy like that. It's only centered. And then you're only going to hit once after the title. So there shouldn't be like a whole chunk of space between the title and your first line of your first paragraph. So we actually don't have Blackboard anymore. There's not going to be a discussion thread on this, but I do want to let you guys know that if you have questions, comments, or concerns about titles, you absolutely can ask me at any time. That's one reason why we have rough drafts. You know, go ahead and try a creative title, especially if you're not really used to doing that, especially if you're used to doing any of those types of titles that I've now said you want to try to avoid. Go for it. Go all out in your rough draft, and I'll give you feedback on it. But definitely, if you're not really sure, especially with the formatting of titles, what to do, then shoot me an email. I'll be happy to go over it in more detail with you.